In today's lesson, we're going to look at blood flow. And before we look at blood flow in terms of how it can be disrupted and how problems related to blood flow in the heart, how they can be solved, first I just want you to quickly go over a few starter questions. And I would like these questions answered and uploaded back to me onto Teams. So the first question is, why is the left ventricle larger than the right? So you don't need to write the questions out, but I would like you to write in full sentences, and could you number your questions accordingly as well when you upload them back? Question 2. How many chambers are in the heart? Question 3. Name 2 arteries connected to the heart, and then I would like you to name 2 veins that are connected to the heart. The last 3 questions. So question 5. Why is the blood in the aorta under high pressure? So blood coming out of the aorta or flowing through the aorta, why is it under high pressure? Question 6. What prevents backward flow of blood in the heart? So when blood is flowing through the heart, when it's coming in or when it's leaving the heart or returning again, what prevents backward flow of blood in the heart? And question 7, explain the function of the coronary arteries. So just a couple of sentences explaining the function of the coronary arteries. So 7 questions. Can you number your questions and can you write in full sentences? You do not need to write out the questions, but can you write in full sentences and upload your answers back to me on Teams? So we'll give this 7 minutes, or let's make it a bit longer. Let's say 9 minutes to answer these questions and upload your answers back to me on Teams. We're going to move on to coronary heart disease. Now, coronary heart disease relates to the arteries that supply oxygen and glucose to the heart muscles. We've looked at the structure of arteries, veins, and capillaries, and we know that arteries supply oxygenated blood. Now, because these arteries are supplying oxygenated blood to the heart and other nutrients for the respiring cardiac muscle tissue, if there's any blockage in these arteries or if there's a narrowing, this can cause complications for the heart. Cardiac muscle will start to die and this can result in a heart attack. So in coronary heart disease, the coronary arteries that supply blood to the heart muscles become narrow. Now the process of this narrowing is what we're going to look at right now. Now I've put an image here in front of you. This is not a coronary artery, however, it's an artery from another part of the body. Now, even though it's not in the heart, still a similar type of process occurs in the coronary arteries that results in complications for the heart, which can result in a heart attack or chest pain. So, looking at this simulation, I want you to look at how this artery, and for argument's sake, let's say this is a coronary artery, I want you to look at how this artery is narrowing. Here you can see blood flowing through an artery, and then some resistance has occurred at this point. This is because of the fatty deposits that are building up in the artery. So you see those fatty deposits building up around the artery walls. This is what causes the narrowing of the coronary artery, and it causes a blockage and reduced blood flow, and sometimes blood flow is completely stopped. So this is what causes the complications. Now, the yellowish substance is the fatty deposits. Now, they can build up via incorrect diet or lack of exercise over a period of time. And because of this, the fatty deposits build up on the sides of the artery wall, and as you can see here, the flow of blood is significantly reduced. Now, this is going to cause complications, specifically if it's in the coronary artery, because this is supplying the cardiac muscle, which is continuously working, and there is a large oxygen demand and glucose demand. So if blood flow is restricted in the coronary arteries, there are going to be significant complications which lead to cardiac muscle dying, and which is essentially a heart attack and can result in death. So I want you just to take a look at this simulation here and just appreciate how the narrowing of arteries, and specifically coronary arteries, occur via the fatty deposits. So let's put some of this into words. So can you take down the sentence that in coronary heart disease, the coronary arteries that supply blood to the heart muscle become narrow? And the next point I want you to put down immediately after that is that a common cause is a buildup of fatty material on the lining of the blood vessel. So I repeat again, a common cause is a buildup of fatty material on the inner lining of the blood vessel. So because we're dealing with the coronary arteries here, inside the coronary arteries, in the lining of the artery, there is a buildup of fatty material, and this is what causes the narrowing of the coronary artery, and this is what leads to complications. So as we have just seen, in coronary heart disease, the narrowing of the artery lining this is a result of buildup of fatty deposits inside the artery. This restricts the supply of oxygen to the heart, to the cardiac muscles. I want you to also tell me what other substance is now also going to be lacking for the cardiac muscles. So in addition to oxygen, what other substance is being restricted when we have a narrowing of the coronary arteries? What other substance is being restricted due to the narrowing of the coronary arteries? So can you type your answer back to me on Teams, and can you just call this question here 4A on Teams, so I know which one you're referring to? So can you just quickly type back on Teams, what other substance is being restricted if we have a coronary artery blockage? We've said oxygen is going to be reduced, but what other substance is being restricted that the cardiac muscle requires to stay healthy and to stay alive? Here you can see a diseased coronary artery in relation to the heart, and you can see how the blood flow is impacted by the buildup of the fatty deposits or the fatty material known as plaque, and this can lead to complications in terms of blood clots forming, the plaque rupturing, and in addition to causing blockages within the coronary artery, you can see, if you look at the diagram where the bottom of the heart is shown, you can see it's turned a greyish colour. This is where the cardiac muscle is dying, so the heart muscle is dying, and this is essentially what leads to the heart attack and what can lead in fatality. So you can see how the blood flow is impacted or is being disrupted because of the buildup of the fatty deposits in the arteries, in the lining of the arteries. And here you can see it in relation to where it would be on the actual heart itself. So now we've just covered how the heart can be diseased in terms of the artery linings being narrowed. So what can we do about a coronary heart disease? about the linings of the arteries. When they are narrowed, what can we do about it? And one way to actually overcome this problem of the narrowing of the arteries, of the coronary arteries, is to treat the arteries with something called a stent. And what happens is that a stent is a metal mesh. It's like a metal mesh that is placed inside the coronary artery. So if you see here, the stent is clearly shown. You can see that where there has been a build-up of plaque in the first artery here. So if we were to look at, okay, so if we were to look at this artery here, so what we are seeing is the stent being placed inside the artery, inside the coronary artery, and alongside the metal mesh, a balloon is also placed inside the artery. Now, when this balloon is inflated, it's going to expand the metal mesh, as you can see in 2 here. Now, as the metal mesh expands, it widens the artery. So our problem earlier was that the coronary artery was narrowing, and this was causing a reduction in the flow of blood, which can be very dangerous because our cardiac muscles are heavily oxygen demanding and glucose demanding. So by inflating this balloon, we also inflate the metal mesh that's attached to it. And this causes the blood vessel to open up. As you inflate the balloon, the metal mesh attached to the balloon also expands, and this results in the expanding of the blood vessel. Now we've inflated the balloon, increased the diameter of the blood vessel because the mesh has also expanded. Now what happens next is that the balloon, so this would be the third point here, the balloon is deflated and removed. However, the stent remains in place, and this holds the blood vessel open now. So the blood vessel doesn't collapse back once you remove the balloon. The expanded metal mesh is staying in place. And this is what holds the blood vessel open, allowing blood flow to flow freely in the coronary artery. And therefore we don't have any more reduction in oxygen or glucose being supplied to the cardiac muscles. Now we're going to do a quick 20-minute task, and I would like you to upload your answers back on Teams. And here again, I want you to write in full sentences, and can you number your questions as well? So question 1, what can cause fatty deposits to build up in arteries? So what can cause fatty deposits or fatty materials or plaque to build up in the arteries, in the artery lining? What can cause the build-up of these fatty deposits? 3 marks. Question 2. What happens to cardiac muscle when coronary arteries are blocked? So what happens to the cardiac muscle if the coronary arteries are blocked and cannot supply the oxygen or glucose? What can this lead to? So that's 3 marks. Question 3. Explain how to reduce the fatty deposits without surgery or medication. So this can be answered in a number of ways. When I talk about how to reduce the fatty deposits without surgery or medication, also I want you to think about how we can prevent the fatty deposits building up in the first place. So question 3, I'll repeat. Explain how to reduce the fatty deposits without surgery or medication. You might want to do a bit of research on this. You might actually already know. So these 3 questions, can you put it onto a Word document, and can you upload your answers back to me on Teams, and we'll give 20 minutes for this. Okay, now, before we move on, I want you to complete another task for me. And again, you're going to upload your answers back to me on Teams. Here, you're going to have to refer back to the coronary artery blockages, because it's linked in terms of how we actually view the problem. You're going to research, so you're going to have to do some research here. What is bypass surgery? So you're going to research what is this concept of a bypass surgery, and I want you to limit your research to these 3 points here. What is it? Where is it used and why? So where do we use bypass surgery? When do we use it and where do we use it in the body, and why do we do it? And just an outline of the procedure. So when we're talking about a bypass surgery, can you just give me an outline, no more than about 3 to 4 sentences? Then I want you to talk about any advantages or disadvantages of the procedure. So this is just for bypass surgery. Where is it used and why? The procedure, just a brief outline of the procedure of a bypass surgery, and what are the advantages and disadvantages. Then I want you to look at the second part of this task, is to research about statins. What is statins? What are statins? And how does it work? How do statins work? And you may know about statins. They're a type of medication. So what type of medication are they? And how do they work? And also I want you to try and find out any latest findings on statins, because there are some opposing viewpoints regarding how statins are used and how they work and whether they're effective or not. So any latest findings on statins, you can maybe find some opposing opinions or opposing arguments for the use of statins, and then I want you to just briefly list, so maybe a couple of advantages or a couple of disadvantages for the use of statins. So can you take 20 minutes here? So 2 research questions now. So you're going to have to do a bit of research and reading here. I want you to look at bypass surgery. Again, not in a huge amount of detail, just limit it to those 3 points there. And again, I'm looking for brief answers. And B, again, about statins, but limit your answers to what it is, how it works. Again, I do not want a whole chemical breakdown of how the drug works. It's the drug chemistry. I'm not looking for that, just a general overview of how it works. And look at any latest findings, so any news reports that talk about statins. And then I want you to just give 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages of using statins. Now we're going to look at 3 other ways in which the heart can be assisted. And can you put the subheading helping the heart? And these are going to be 3 other areas of focus that we're going to look at now. 1 is heart valve treatment, 2 artificial pacemakers, and 3 artificial hearts. And what I want you to be aware of is that when we're talking about artificial pacemakers and artificial hearts, here we're actually inserting something else, something artificial into the body to assist with our heart in its normal functioning. Now, when we're talking about leaky valves, we're talking about the valves in relation to the heart. Now, just as a recap, you can see here the valves that are in the heart, and you can see where they are located and their function. Their function is to prevent backward flow of blood. So as the blood is flowing through the atriums and the ventricles, as they're being pumped around, there's always a chance that the blood could be pushed backwards, and the valves are there to prevent this. So this is just a quick recap of how the importance of valves in terms of blood flow. And so you're just seeing here how the valves are working, their location, their names, and when they are dealing with oxygenated blood or deoxygenated blood. So just take a look at this just to give you a quick recap of what the function of valves are, i.e. they're to prevent backward flow of blood, and also their location. And remember what I said last time, you do not need to know the names of the valves. You can if you want, but it's not necessary for your exam. But you do need to know the function of the valves in the heart. So heart valves have to withstand a lot of pressure, and over time they may start to leak or become rigid and not open fully. So this makes the heart less efficient, and it's not going to be effective in pumping oxygenated blood around the body. So people may become breathless, and if treatment is not offered, you may have shortness of breath, and this can eventually lead to a fatality. So heart valves, over time, they may start to leak or become rigid or not fully open, and you can see from the simulation that the heart valves are continually opening and closing, and they're also under a lot of pressure. When the ventricles are contracting, they're under a lot of pressure because the ventricles are forcing blood through into either, depending on where the blood is going, if it's going to the lungs to be oxygenated or if it's going to the rest of the body. So there's a lot of pressure on the valves. Now, doctors can operate and replace faulty valves in the heart. You can have mechanical valves made of materials such as titanium and other types of polymers. And these types of heart valve replacements can last a long time. However, with mechanical valves, you have to take medication for the rest of your life to prevent the blood from clotting around it. So let's just take a few points here now regarding what we've just discussed about the heart valves. So heart valves have to withstand a lot of pressure. So can you just put down heart valves have to withstand a lot of pressure. Now, over time, what happens is that they may start to leak, become stiff, or not fully open. So over time, they may A, leak, B, they may become, let's say, rigid or stiff, and C, not open fully. And you can see from the animation that if the heart valve is not fully opening, it's going to cause problem with the oxygenated blood flowing into the heart or going out of the heart, and vice versa for deoxygenated blood. So over time, the heart valves may leak, they may become leaky, they may become rigid or not fully open. Now all of this makes the heart less efficient. Okay, so because of these leaky valves, the heart is less efficient, and what happens is that this can result in breathlessness, it can make a person breathless, and if it's not treated, it can lead to death if not treated. So continuing with leaky valves, doctors can replace a faulty heart valve with a mechanical valve, and mechanical valves tend to be made of titanium and other polymers. So leaky valves can be replaced by mechanical valves. So can we just put down this point here? Leaky valves can be replaced by mechanical valves. Can be replaced by mechanical valves. Okay, so we can replace damaged heart valves via mechanical valves, and these mechanical valves are made of titanium and other polymers. However, there's an issue with using mechanical valves. Although they will last a long time, so we can say that mechanical valves last a long time. The issue is that if you have been given a mechanical valve, you have to take medication for the rest of your life to prevent the blood from clotting around the valve. So yes, it lasts a long time. That's a good positive. However, the patient has to take medication for rest of life, for the rest of their life. The reason they have to take medication is because to prevent blood clotting. To prevent the blood clotting around the valve, the mechanical valve. To prevent blood clotting around the mechanical valve. Okay, so this is the disadvantage of using a mechanical valve. You can see on the picture, on the second picture, the diagram showing before and after the mechanical valve has been introduced. The other type of heart valve that can be used to replace a faulty valve is known as a biological valve. And biological valves are based on valves that have been taken from animals such as pigs or cattle, or you can also have human donor valves from another person. Now, these types of biological valves work better than mechanical valves in such that the person does not need any medication afterwards to prevent blood clots. So, as with mechanical valves, you need to be on medication to prevent blood clots for the rest of your life. You need to take that medication. The downside to biological valves is that they last approximately 12 to 15 years. So let's put some of this in words. Now, biological valves taken from animals, and examples would be pigs or cattle, and also we can actually take them from other humans as well. So, and humans. Okay, so but these are biological valves. So a donor can supply you a biological valve. Now, they work better. So let's say they perform better from mechanical valves because you do not need to be on medication for the rest of your life. So they perform better. Okay, patient does not need to be on medication, does not require further medication. However, the downside would be that these valves last approximately 12 to 15 years. So downside, let's say disadvantage, okay, valves last 12 to 15 years, so you might need to get another replacement afterwards. So can you just take these notes down for leaky valves and how we can actually treat leaky valves from a biological viewpoint? So we've looked at mechanical and now we've looked at biological. Now we're going to move on to artificial pacemakers. Now, when we talk about artificial pacemakers, we have to first of all look at the natural pacemaker within our heart. The natural pacemaker is a region of the heart that regulates and controls the rhythm of the heartbeat via electrical impulses. So before we start looking in detail about the artificial pacemaker, I'm just going to recap in terms of how the heart contracts, and you do need to be familiar with the origin of the electrical impulse from the heart and how it actually causes the different regions of the heart to contract. So looking at this simulation here, we can see how the heartbeat is regulated and how the heart rhythm comes about. Notice a sinoatrial node, SA node, and its location in the atrium. So essentially what happens is that the impulse originates from the SA node and it causes the atriums to contract. So when the electrical impulse is originating in the atrium, this causes the atriums to contract. The impulses travel down to the ventricles, and then once the electrical impulses reach there, as you can see here, the ventricles will contract, and it's called the atrioventricular node, AV node. And as impulses reach the ventricles, this causes the ventricles to contract and eject the blood. So this is in essence how the heartbeat is regulated and how the heart rhythm is regulated. And the important point here is the SA node, and that is where the natural pacemaker, the region of the natural pacemaker, and from there the electrical impulses are sent from the atrium down to the ventricles, and this is what causes the regions of the heart to contract. So let's put this into words. So can you put the subheading artificial pacemaker, and can you note down that the resting rhythm of a healthy heart is around 70 beats a minute. So 70 beats per minute is the resting rhythm of a healthy heart. So resting rhythm of a healthy heart is approximately 70 beats per minute. Okay, so that's the resting rhythm of a healthy heart. Now, this rhythm of the heart is controlled by a group of cells found in the right atrium of your heart. And as we looked at in the simulation, it was called the sinoatrial node. Now, you need to know of the location of where the natural pacemaker is originating from. So can you put down next point? This rhythm, it is controlled by a group of cells and I'm just going to put SA node here. It is controlled by a group of cells in the right atrium. Okay, so by a group of cells in the right atrium. Now, the SA node, or these group of cells in the right atrium, are known as the natural pacemaker. So it's known as the natural pacemaker. And from this region, the electrical impulses are going to generate and go from the atriums down to the ventricles. And as you can see, that as the electrical impulses travel, so as they travel across the atriums contract. As they travel down to the ventricles contract. Now, if this natural pacemaker stops working properly, this can result in a lot of problems, and serious complications can arise. If the heart beats too slowly, the person will not get enough oxygen to the respiring cells or tissues. If the heart beats too fast, then it cannot pump blood properly either. So this rhythm that is regulated via the sinoatrial node, the SA node, is to make sure that we're getting adequate levels of oxygen pumped around the body. And if there is any issues with how this impulse is being regulated in the heart, then we can get certain problems. If there is an issue with the natural pacemaker in the heart, there are a number of complications that can arise. So if the natural pacemaker stops working properly, the heart beat may become too slow or too fast. If the heartbeat is too slow, this will mean that the affected person will not get enough oxygen, so the respiring tissues will not receive the adequate oxygen that they require. If it's too fast, the blood cannot be pumped properly around. The pump does not work properly, the heart does not work properly because it's beating too fast. So this means that the blood cannot be pumped properly around. To correct the problems arising from a faulty natural pacemaker, we can use an electrical device known as an artificial pacemaker. Now, an artificial pacemaker, as you can see in the first diagram to the right hand side of the screen, is positioned under the skin of the chest with wires running to the heart itself. Now, there are two wires that originate from the pacemaker, and these are connected to the heart. And you can see the two connections on the picture just below, where you can see a pacemaker. So, problems with the rhythm of the heart can be corrected using an artificial pacemaker. Now, an artificial pacemaker is an electrical device used to correct any irregularities in the heart rate. And this pacemaker is implanted into the chest. Now, artificial pacemakers only weigh about 20 to 50 grams, and they are attached to the heart via 2 wires. And if you look at the diagram, the second diagram to the right, you can see where the 2 connections are coming into the pacemaker, the artificial pacemaker. And the artificial pacemaker sends strong, regular electrical signals to the heart so that it may and stimulate the heart to beat properly. So let's put some of these points down here. So the artificial pacemaker is an electrical device. It's an electrical device. Okay, weighs approximately 20 to 50 grams. And it's in between 20 and 50 grams. And it's implanted into the chest. Okay, and under the skin. Okay. Next point, 2 wires there are, and it is attached to the heart via 2 wires. So attached to the heart via 2 wires. And you can see where the 2 connections are on the diagram, on the second diagram, on the second image. And the artificial pacemaker sends strong, regular electrical signals to the heart so that it may be stimulated to beat properly. So sends strong, regular signals, electrical signals to the heart, thus stimulating the heart to beat properly. The modern pacemakers are very sensitive to what our body needs and only work when the natural rhythm goes wrong. And some artificial pacemakers stimulate the heart to beat faster when vigorous exercise is being undertaken. Now, there are some disadvantage to artificial pacemakers in that you will have to have regular checkups throughout your life if you have an artificial pacemaker. However, most people will say that to correct an irregular heartbeat with a small device, if it's just a checkup, it's a trade-off that's worth having if you need to correct something that can be quite fatal. So the pacemaker is able to correct irregular heartbeats if the heart is beating too fast or too slow. And if you have it, you will have to have regular checkups throughout your life. But because of how much it improves the quality of life, it is generally assumed that the pacemaker is a worthwhile treatment to undertake. Now we're going to look at artificial hearts. But what we're going to do now is you're going to do a research task here, and I'm going to give you 20 minutes. And again, I would like you to upload your work back on Teams. So I'm not going to talk about artificial hearts. You are going to find the information and you're going to limit it to these points here. So first of all, I would like you to define what an artificial heart is. Then I would like you to explain why we need an artificial, what circumstance would cause an artificial heart to be used. And then describe 2 past heart models. Artificial hearts have been many years in the working, and and the technology is constantly being upgraded to make better artificial hearts. But I want you to focus on just two previous heart models or artificial hearts that have been made, and just give a comparison. Maybe talk about what were the limitations of these artificial hearts, of these models. And finally, I want you to explore the future of artificial hearts, and I want you to describe what upcoming technologies are being looked at or being developed to make an artificial heart. So this would be about, I would say, approximately a quarter of a page with diagrams. I would like some diagrams showing past models of artificial hearts and some future concepts as well, including maybe also one artificial hearts that we're using currently.